This is the story of a house that should never have cost $800,000. A tiny, aging 1,200 square foot box with peeling paint, creaking floors, and a yard barely big enough for a dog to turn around in. Yet in the spring of 2025, it sold for the kind of money Houstonians once associated with mansions in River Oaks. The question is simple. The answer is not. How does a city famous for cheap land, sprawl, and the no-zoning myth end up with home prices that look like coastal real estate? Tonight, we uncover the hidden policy that quietly distorted the entire market. A policy that didn't just raise prices, it engineered scarcity. It created winners and losers, and it turned ordinary houses into speculative gold mines. Act 1. The Paradox. Houston's reputation has always been built on one idea: you can afford a home here. For decades, that was true. The median single-family home price hovered in the low $200,000. Even after the pandemic spike, the median price in early 2025 stabilized around $330,000, with an average price of roughly $424,000, according to the Houston Association of Realtors. A growing metro, plenty of land, no traditional zoning, and a long history of building outward. It should have been the perfect formula for affordability. But then the anomalies started appearing. A two-bedroom teardown attracting 30 offers. A 1950s bungalow going for double the asking price. A shack with termite damage commanding luxury-level bids. The city famous for housing abundance suddenly had pockets where modest, unimpressive homes were selling like rare collectibles. Something was off, and it wasn't the houses. It was the rules governing the land beneath them. Act 2. The Specific Policy. Houston is the largest major city in America without conventional zoning, but that doesn't mean it has no land use regulation. Instead, it has something more complicated: minimum lot sizes, setback requirements, parking mandates, and private deed restrictions. Hidden in those rules is the law responsible for the modern housing squeeze, Houston's minimum lot size policy. Before 1998, single-family homes inside the city had to sit on lots of at least 5,000 square feet. That rule kept low density. Then came the 1998 reform, part of the Chapter 42 overhaul. In an effort to encourage urban infill, the city lowered minimum lots inside the I-610 loop to 3,500 square feet and under certain conditions as small as 1,400 square feet. In 2013, the city expanded this small lot allowance to all of Houston. On paper, this should have unlocked tens of thousands of new, smaller, more affordable homes. More supply, more choice, more affordability. But the reform came with a built-in escape hatch. Entire blocks could vote to freeze their original larger lot sizes for decades. This mechanism, called the Special Minimum Lot Size Area, allowed neighborhoods to prevent lot splitting and block higher density housing, and they did, aggressively. Street after street opted out, locking their blocks into suburban-style lots in the middle of a growing city. The result was that only a tiny fraction of single-family parcels, around 0.5% according to urban land use researchers, actually transitioned into small lot or townhouse developments. In other words, Houston passed a law to increase housing, but then allowed everyone to opt out of it. Demand grew, supply didn't. That gap became the fuel of price explosions. The no-zoning city had quietly created one of the tightest housing bottlenecks in Texas. Act 3. The Unjust Winners and Losers. When supply is restricted but demand keeps rising, someone benefits, and it isn't young families. Investors quickly realized that the few parcels not locked under deed restrictions or minimum lot size protections were gold mines. They bought cheap bungalows, held them, then sold them at outrageous prices simply because the land beneath them was one of the rare places where density was still legal. These houses weren't valuable. The permission to build more densely was. Developers with the capital to assemble multiple lots profited even more. They flipped land into clusters of expensive townhomes, not affordable ones because luxury margins were higher. And with no inclusionary zoning, because Houston prohibits it, developers had zero obligation to include any affordable units. Meanwhile, first-time buyers faced an impossible market. The median price of $330,000 may look reasonable, but in neighborhoods where opt-outs restricted new supply, the real price of entry skyrocketed. A young couple looking for their first home wasn't just competing with other families. They were competing with developers, investors, and rental conglomerates who saw any legal buildable lot as a scarce asset. Longtime residents became collateral damage. As nearby homes sold for record-breaking prices, property taxes rose. Elderly residents were pressured to sell. Communities fractured. The city intended its lot size reform to expand home ownership. Instead, because so many residents opted out, the reform became a profit engine for a small number of investors and a barrier for everyone else. A system designed to increase supply ended up protecting scarcity, and scarcity made ordinary houses absurdly expensive. Act 4. The Future Warning. Houston was supposed to be the national model of how to keep homes affordable. No zoning, flexible land use, a willingness to grow. But the story of the $800,000 shack shows something more uncomfortable. A city can have no zoning and still have housing scarcity. A city can reform a rule but attach so many opt-outs that the reform becomes meaningless. A city can try to increase density and accidentally create a speculative market where only a handful of parcels hold all the value. If other American metro areas copy Houston's approach, loosening rules in theory, restricting supply in practice, they will replicate Houston's crisis. Cities across the Sun Belt, the Mountain West, and the Midwest are already debating upzoning, lot size reform, and the missing middle. But if they pair these reforms with opt-outs, carve-outs, or private deed restrictions, they will not get more homes. They will get more speculation. The warning is clear. America's housing crisis is not just an economic problem or a demographic trend. It is a policy failure. Every rule that limits where homes can be built or how many can be built becomes a pressure valve. Close enough valves, and even a cheap city becomes expensive. Houston, once celebrated as proof that housing abundance was possible, now stands as proof of what happens when policy pretends to be open while quietly restricting supply. Behind every overpriced shack is a city that failed to let homes be built. And behind every family priced out is a policy that made scarcity profitable. To fix the housing crisis, America must learn from Houston's mistake. Density on paper is meaningless. Density in reality is everything.